Welcome back to Abington News and Views. I'm Christopher Dean, and I'm speaking with Montgomery County Board of Commission Chairman Jim Matthews. And when we left off, Jim, we were talking about Ken Davis.
Right.
Ken Davis is a name that always comes up. He's the GOP county chairman.
Currently, correct.
Currently the GOP county chairman. There's a lot of talk about cronyism and the patronage system, hiring of friends in the county. In fact, Joe Hoeffel ran a campaign highly critical of that, I believe, with your
He just borrowed the expressions that Bruce had used during his campaign against me in the primary.
Okay. I want to know why Joe Hoeffel would do that. He's borrowing Bruce Castor's comments to campaign?
Well, because...
I mean, that's hardly original if he's borrowing Bruce Castor's
Well, that's
comments.
all they had to use. He had nothing else to go on except what
Joe
Bruce.
Hoeffel?
That's it. That's all he used during the campaign. Everything he used and every bit of his campaign material came from Bruce Castor's campaign against me in the primary.
I don't even understand that. And you've aligned yourself with this guy.
No, what are you talking about?
With Joe Hoeffel. I mean, he's basically...
Joe used only that stuff that had already been vetted by Republicans. He didn't have to create anything because he just borrowed from
I'm assuming he believed it. I'm assuming he believed patronage was going strong in Montgomery County politics.
It resonated very well. When you make up a story, it sounds pretty good. You're going to use that story too if you're the adversary.
Okay, and so he used that story because it played well.
Sure it did.
See, the cynics and most of us out there would say that's exactly what he did. He's just using a story because it plays well and it gets votes.
Because there wasn't anything negative about our government.
Okay,
all he could use was what was fabricated by Bruce.
Well, let's get into it then. Ken Davis, GOP chairman.
Right.
He apparently did receive a lobbying contract. That's what his firm does, I guess, for the county.
No, let's straighten it out. Let's go back in time.
Well,
when we gave out the contract, Bruce, Ken was an acquaintance. He wasn't even a candidate for chairman of the Republican Party at the time. We went out, the three of us, Ruth Damsker, myself, and Tom Allison, up and interviewed 3 different firms in Harrisburg. And as we had done for 8 years, everything we did was unanimous. And we got down and we didn't know which firm we were going to use in Harrisburg. And Ruth Damsker, sitting in Mark Singal, the former acting Democratic governor of this Commonwealth, sitting in his chair, rocking back and forth, looking at the river, she goes, I like this firm. Why? Because it had Molly McAteer, who was the actual lobbyist, a former deputy mayor under Rendell.
So you did not know this guy?
I knew Ken Davis, but he wasn't one of the lobbyists. He was a principal in that firm.
Okay.
But he wasn't even a candidate for chairman of the Republican Party at that time. We were interviewing firms, 3 different major lobbying firms. And we went up, Steve Shackman, who's best buddies with DeWeese, knows a ton of people up there, knows more Democrats than Republicans. Molly, who worked for Rendell, and Steve Shackman, Molly McAteer, and Mark Singal, the former acting governor. What's as Democratic firm as you can get? We sat there as public affairs management with Dwayne Morris, and we sat there and talked about it. I said, well, I couldn't decide. I had John McNichol I was thinking of going with, his firm, not the John McNichol, his nephew. And we all have friends in the lobbying business. We knew we wanted a lobbyist for the county to get our fair share. Philadelphia had a lobbyist in Washington and in Harrisburg. The governor had a lobbyist in Washington, Philadelphia, and Harrisburg, the governor. We had no lobbyists. We wanted to level the playing field. But we wanted to make it unanimous. We weren't going to make this political.
When did this happen?
This is 4 months before the Republican election for chairman.
Okay.
This was done, we started this process in January. So either January or early February. And we sat there and we said, what do you think, Ruth? She said, I like this firm.
Okay.
It wasn't my first choice, but we knew that way would be unanimous, and I wanted a lobbyist because I wanted to bring in the American Revolution Center. There's a lot of things I had on the agenda. I wanted to change this whole liquid fuels tax thing, this thing from 1930. A lot of things I promised the voters we were going to look into, and I was going to do it with a lobbyist. Now, we hire that firm. 4 months later, the guy who's a principal, not one of the lobbyists, but a principal in the firm in Philadelphia, a principal of the firm, nevertheless, he runs for chairman of the Montgomery County Republican Committee, wins by a landslide, 1 vote. And then it's implied that I picked him and made him chair. I'm not very good at making kings. The guy won by 1 vote. And this is after his firm had been selected 4 months earlier because of their connections with a unanimous vote by the Democratic commissioner. That's what happened. So when somebody says to me, and they wanted their usual retainer of $10,000 a month, and we said, no, we're going to make it $7,500 a month. And then when people come in, and by the way, we worked with them very effectively for 2 or 3 years. They brought in $500,000 towards our shooting range. Now, hear me out. And then 3 years later, somebody says to me, oh, by the way, you've given your good friend Ken Davis $7,500. That's $90,000 a year in taxpayer money. That's $270,000. How can you look in the mirror? And I said, how can you look in the mirror and make that accusation? It's totally contrived.
Well,
That's
how
not
does he
based on
become the
reality.
GOP boss? How does this guy become, why do they call him the GOP boss, and apparently he
ran for
handpicks the
chairman?
candidates?
No, he does not. He ran for chairman of the Republican committee, and he does not handpick the candidates. Never has.
So he's not in the back room sort of figuring out who's going to run for county government or not. He's not the end all in who's running and who's not. He
I
doesn't
had
say
already
I'm
been
running Jim
sworn in.
Matthews.
He didn't become chairman until 5 months after I got sworn
This is
in.
what I'm
as
not getting. What
commissioner.
year did he become chairman?
I got
Just roughly.
sworn in 2000, so he became chairman in 2001, 2001, 2000, 2004, 2005, 2004. 2004 he became chairman.
Okay, let me move on.
This is 5 months after I got sworn in as commissioner.
Okay,
so
but-
he didn't make me chairman.
But
I don't
you
even know if I had
haven't,
his
you haven't
support.
cozied up in all those years since, whereas you have a very cozy relationship. He's being paid.
Now you're
Taxpayer
using the
money.
word cozy. I've never been out socially in my life with him. Never went out and had a drink with him. Never gone out on a date with him and his wife and my. We're not friends.
Okay.
We're acquaintances.
Let me ask
And
you.
that's why when something like that is fabricated after the fact, 4 months after, we choose him because of his relationship with Mark Singal, the Democratic governor, then I get accused 3 years later that, oh, well, that was all a deal to give a buddy of yours. Well, you know, that's nonsense. The reason he was thrown back in retrospect 3 years later, I say he's a buddy of mine, is because in 2007, he agreed I should be a candidate and not Bruce or one of his people, that I should be the most appropriate candidate for commissioner.
Okay, let's move on.
So that makes him my buddy.
Okay, we need to take a break. Let's move on. We'll be back. There's a lot to cover. So stay with us. We'll be back with Jim Matthews right after this word.